No, I'll come back to this. The skill sets and how we need to work with these machines, which is really the core, theme of the book. But what I really found again, very very evocative in terms of an idea is your trust heat map, because what I really liked about that is really, where do you really bring in full automation and where you have to have human in loop. I thought it was a beautiful representation. And can you just unpack that big idea that you've written in the book?
Sure. So the what you refer to, this trust heat map, is something that emerged, after, I don't know, 20 years of building AI applications in a number of areas. So finance is something I'd been doing for a long time. I had algorithms that were trading automatically, no human intervention, completely systematic. And that was interesting because I did ask myself, why do I trust the algorithm, right? In finance, which was wrong almost half the time, right? My win rates were, barely 52%, right? I mean, in finance, if you can get, a win rate of 52% with equal winners and losers, you should celebrate, right? And 53%, 54, you should manage the world's money. So the edge that you need in finance is very small, in order for an algorithm to amplify it, right? Because once you have a slight edge, then you just multiply it by trading as frequently as possible and trading across as many instruments as possible, right? That's the name of the game in finance.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. I thought that, I'm willing to trust an algorithm in finance without any human intervention. In fact, when I intervened, we would invariably mess things up, right? So, which is another theme that maybe we can touch on, which is, at one point there was this assumption that humans plus algorithms are better than algorithms. Not true, right?
Mm.
Maybe true sometimes, but not always, and certainly not true in trading when it comes to
Yeah.
finance, right? If you've done the math right, get the hell out of the way, right? That's the whole reason for being systematic, right? You shouldn't be trying to second guess the machine or think you're better, right? If you're systematic, right? You intervene very, very infrequently, in rare events like COVID, right? Something happens and, that I can understand. But on a day to day basis, you're systematic. So that was, one thing that was interesting. I'd also worked in sports and healthcare. And, in healthcare, for example, I'd found that you probably wouldn't be willing to take a decision from an algorithm. You want the human specialist, the doctor, to be making that decision, right?
True.
Even though an algorithm may be correct much more than it is in finance, right? The algorithm may be correct 90% of the time. You
Correct.
still want the human to say, yes, it makes sense, or no, it doesn't make sense, or well, this is slightly different in this situation. The algorithm couldn't have taken that into account, right? You want that reassurance, from a human, right? So, um, and then you have things like driverless cars, right? Which until very recently, right, this is a technology where there are hardly any mistakes,
Yeah.
and yet you're really reluctant to turn yourself over to an algorithm, right? So when I thought about the range of problems, I realized that our trust in a algorithm really depends on how frequently it's wrong and the consequences of error when it's wrong. And so those are the two things that I've put on the x-axis and the y-axis. So the x-axis is predictability. It goes from sort of 0 to 1, 0 being completely random, 1 being completely deterministic, like, will the sun rise tomorrow, right? We know that. And on the y-axis are the costs of error from 0 to infinity, right? And so I have this map where there's a green zone, which is, problems to the lower right. If machine hardly makes any mistakes and the mistakes are inconsequential, then you should trust the algorithm, right? Whereas on the bottom, on the top left, where there's unpredictably lots of errors, high cost of error, you wouldn't trust the machine, right? That's an inherently human thing. Now, it doesn't mean that a human will do it well, but it just means that there's no basis for the machine to do that. So that, in a nutshell, is the trust heat map, and you can place all kinds of problems on it and see where you are, willing to trust the machine, where you're not, and those problems that lie sort of on this frontier where, it's moving from don't trust the machine to trust the machine. And actually, the Damodaran-BOT is a great example of that, of a technology that I would assert is moving from the red zone to the green zone. That is,
Mm.
in 2015, when I talked to Damodaran about this problem, there's no way that you could trust a machine to do valuation, right? Now we've got a demonstration, um, and we're evaluating it. It still makes mistakes. Sometimes it comes up with a thesis that's less than satisfactory. So at the moment, I'd say we're sort of on this frontier, as far as long-term investing is concerned with, the bot. But just to come back and sort of wrap up the answer to your question, the trust heat map is really a trade-off. It expresses a trade-off between how frequently a machine will be wrong and the consequences of its error. And it's a really simple idea, and that's what the trust heat map is about. And I found this to be I find that senior managers, leaders, find this to be really useful in helping them position the various problems that they're dealing with in their companies, on this heat map, and prioritize which ones are more amenable to automation versus those where you will need a human in the loop for the foreseeable future.